Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Please, last stragglers, take a seat. Welcome to this program by Radboud Reflects and the Donders Institute for Neurosciences. Wow, there's a lot of people in here tonight. It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for being here and for braving the rain to get here, probably. So I want to tell you a little story about a dream I had tonight, actually, which was very stressful because I dreamt that I was running late to get to this program, and as you do. And I got lost on the way here. It got worse and worse. When I got here, there was no door in the building for some reason. And then when I finally did end up inside, it got worse still, because it turned out that you, the audience, were all penguins for some inconceivable reason. And when I woke up, I was completely stressed out, and the day still had to begin, and all I could think was, brain, why? Why was this necessary? Why did I have this dream and not a nice one? Well, that's what we're going to find out tonight. Well, maybe not this particular dream or my particular brain, but dreams in general, and how they work in our brains and what the history of dreaming is in our culture. And luckily for us, we have two very knowledgeable people tonight here with us, who are going to take us on a little journey through dreamland. And they both work at the Radboud University, and the first one is philosopher Herman Westerink. He researches Freudian psychoanalysis and psychiatry. And the second one is Sarah Schoch, and she is a neuroscientist who looks at dreams, memory, and sleep. They will both give us a short lecture, after which I will have a conversation with them, and by the end of that, you will also have time to ask your questions, for them to answer. And at the very end of the program, we have a special feature tonight, for which I'm going to need your help. So I'm going to give you a little task. So behind me, you can see a QR code, and I see everybody already knows what that means. But for those of you who don't, please take out your phones, go to your camera, and point it at the QR code. It will then take you to a website where we ask you a very simple question. Tell us about a dream you had. And please try to contain it in one sentence, because I know it's very tempting to tell us the whole story, but please do it in one sentence. Because the reason we're doing this is that at the end of the program, we are joined by our very own Radboud campus poet, Thijs Kersten, who is going to use all your input, all your dreams, to write a poem for us, and then recite it at the end of the program. So please share your deepest, darkest, well, maybe not your deepest and darkest, please darkest, as you wish. Well, it's going to be probably more fun if it's your deepest and darkest dream. But your weirdest, your most recent, one that was particularly memorable to you for some reason, maybe one that even came true, just a dream that you can remember. And then at the end, we will see what Thijs can make of it. Now that you're all very busy and nobody is paying attention to me, it's probably a good moment to tell you that my name is Pam Teunissen, and I am a program developer at Radboud Reflects, and tonight I'll be moderating the conversation and the Q&A and the whole evening. So I'm going to give you like a minute more to fill out the dream question, and then we're going to go to the first lecture. So if you are done, just put your phone away and put it on mute also, maybe. Good idea, so I can sort of guess how many people are still busy and how many people are done. Yeah, I see a lot of people still frowning, still on their phones. I'll give you like a few seconds more. After which the website will also shut down, so it will no longer be possible to submit a dream. So if you can't remember any dream, that's fine. There's probably enough input as it is. Okay. I see most people are done. So I know it's tempting to now discuss your dreams with the person next to you, but please keep that inside until the end of the program. There will be ample time for that. Because I'd like to invite our first speaker to the stage. And our first speaker is Herman. Please give him a warm applause.
Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay. So I have about 20 minutes to tell you something about dreams and the way in which this surely wondrous and also somewhat enigmatic phenomenon has been thought about in Western history. I will confine myself and also make some small reflections or remarks on that history. I will confine myself to our own tradition of thought. That is already interesting and also complicated enough, I think, for 20 minutes. But this does not mean that what has been said about dreams in Western thought is necessarily very different or doesn't have some crossovers with dreams and dream thoughts on dreams in other cultures and ways of thinking. Those who study the conception and meaning of dreams in other cultures will quickly come across a number of elements that can be found, I think, everywhere where dreams are considered. Namely, dreams have something to say, at least some dreams, or most dreams, or all dreams, that depends. They have a meaning. They are not meaningless. They contain an encrypted message that somehow needs to be deciphered. That meaning is not immediately clear, hence. Dreams are not factual communications, so they must be interpreted and unraveled. That's the second point. And third, if dreams do indeed seek to convey a meaningful message, then the question arises as to who the messenger is. Who is the sender of the message? And also, of course, who is the recipient of the message? If you dive into the sources of Western culture, you quickly notice that dreams are assigned special significance. Dreams are often considered, and now I'm going back to ancient cultures, considered predictions of the future. Dreams answer questions of present and future. This immediately says something about the messenger and the message conveyed in dreams. Dreams are then seen as coming from God or the God, warning a person or even an entire community of what is to come. This is not with an eye to still avoid or to be able to avert that future, but to be well prepared for it. Consider, for example, the story that some of you may know who had a religious education, the story of the dreaming Pharaoh and the most famous dream interpreter in the Old Testament, Joseph. The Pharaoh dreams that he sees 7 fat cows grazing, and then he sees in a dream 7 skinny cows eating the fat cows. And then he has another dream about 7 fat grain stalks being eaten by 7 lean and barren grain stalks. No seer or dream interpreter at the court of the Pharaoh can explain these dreams except a man locked up in prison, Joseph. And indeed, he knows how to interpret the dreams because he knows who the sender is, God. And he knows what the message of the dream is. There will be 7 fat years and then there will be 7 lean years. There is still plenty of time to prepare the kingdom for those 7 lean years to come. Hence, Joseph also says to the Pharaoh, in these dreams, God shows you what God has decided is going to happen in the coming years. There's no avoiding it. Nothing can be changed about it, so be prepared. The dream is a kind of a medium for wise counseling, you could say, in this context. Another famous Old Testament dream is that of Jacob, who in his dream, in a dream, sees a ladder connecting heaven and earth. A ladder angels climb down and up to tell him the message that the land on which he is sleeping will be given to his descendants. The dream here is a prophecy, a glimpse into the further future. But not all dreams come from God or gods and give insight into the future. Anyone who reads an ancient Greek author like Artemidoros, who wrote a kind of a manual for dream interpretation, a dream book, quickly sees that dream interpretation is quite an art that begins with making a distinction between dreams that are insignificant, because there can be insignificant dreams, and that have no special meaning, and dreams that do have a meaning. Also, once you have established that a dream is significant, how you do that, I honestly don't really know, and communicate something about the future, then again one is faced with a difficult question to answer. Does the dream say something about the future of the person dreaming? For example, about his state of health and a certain, let's say, medical prognosis for the future, or rather about people around him, or perhaps even about the future of an entire nation. So you see, this becomes quite an art of interpreting. Is a dream insignificant? Is it meaningful? Is it not? Who is the messenger? Who is the recipient? You could say that with the advent of Christianity, I move very quickly through history, as you notice, something curious is happening. There are always exceptions to the rule, but it is safe to say that Christianity places very little value on the idea of the dream as a prophecy or warning of what is to come, or as a counselor and a source of insight and wisdom. I would almost say quite to the opposite. For Christianity, dreams are a problem. You may be familiar with examples from paintings of monks and hermits being tempted somewhere in the desert. Consider the temptations of Saint Anthony, painted by Hieronymus Bosch, or later also famously by Salvador Dali. I think you know what I mean, these paintings in the desert with these elephants on very lean and slim legs. It's like imagining yourself in a dream, and that is not surprising because for Christian monks and hermits, dreams were a problem, a meaningful problem though. After all day long, waking and observant, these people were busy gaining control of their inner lives and their inner selves through all kinds of exercises and strict discipline. They were striving to achieve what they called a pure heart, a heart purged of unsound, evil, sinful thoughts, fantasies, spontaneous incursions and thoughts. But yes, then the nights, and especially the dreams, are a problem. Because when you sleep, you have no control over your inner self. And seductive dream images of women, food, possessions, enemies, fame, and honor bubble up. And there you go, as a monk. Dreams are troublemakers. Dreams show what demons still lurk in the dark corners of the soul. So no, the monks preferred not to have dreams, and certainly not wet dreams. At the same time, however, those dreams were meaningful. They showed something of the actual state of the soul, however troubling it is. They shed light on what was normally covered up and hidden. So dreams provided some kind of self-knowledge, at least if you knew how to interpret them properly. Dreams should be interpreted, not because they give insight in the future, but because they give insight into how a person is in his spiritual state in the here and now. They give insight into hidden thoughts, fantasies and passions. Dreams do not give predictions, but diagnoses. They are a kind of seismograph, measuring the hidden tremors and movements that shake the soul to its foundations. We leave behind the troubled monks and Christian thinkers and make a move to philosophy in modern times. You could say that someone like René Descartes does connect to a longer tradition in which dreams show something of our ability to fantasize, to think freely, and to develop all kinds of representations and images. Dreams show something of our mental abilities. Humans are very creative beings. But Descartes asks, do dreams also provide any kind of reliable knowledge? The answer is an unequivocal no. On the contrary, like fantasizing or hallucinating, dreams mainly show that we can easily deceive ourselves or be deceived, that we can assume and believe something to be true or certain without having any real grounded knowledge of it. After all, in dreams we cannot distinguish between what is fantasy and what is reality. We perceive in dreams something as real that is in fact not real. We think we perceive something as real and genuine, but as soon as we wake up, we realize that we have only dreamed it. No, dreams do not provide certain knowledge. Dreams are deceptive and deceptions, and they are, to a large extent, for that reason, irrational. Philosophers have since preferred to disregard dreams, paying little attention to them, certainly in the Enlightenment period, and pointing at most to their functional characteristics. Immanuel Kant, for example, sees dreams as permanent companions of sleep. And it is a good thing that we dream, he says, because at least this nocturnal mental activity ensures that sleeping is not the same as dying. For some reason, Kant is always a bit, grumpy, and as long as there is mental activity, we are not dead, which is of course true. I mean, we must admit. Hence, he can also write that nightmares have a beneficial effect, that you are startled awake because you dream. And now there are some typical, very boring Kant examples. Because you dream that you have lost your way. I could also say, missed a random train, lost the thread in a sermon, which is also a good thing to do actually, or appear in a company not wearing a wig, but a nightcap. In short, real nightmares for someone from the 18th century like Immanuel Kant. That you are then startled awake is good, because it makes the chest muscles and the heart muscles contract again, while they were just coming to a standstill. Nightmares prevent us from dying. So for him, dreams seem to have a kind of a biological function. They keep the mind and body active. Dreams, especially anxiety dreams, keep you from accidentally dying in your sleep. I'm not sure what the neuroscientist would say about this. And yet, in philosophy, as always, surely and slowly, dreams will come to occupy an important place again. And especially in the 19th century, I say philosophy, I might also have been able to say psychology. But psychology arises out of philosophy in that 19th century. After all, philosophers at that time are more and more occupied with psychological research, also experimental research, into our mental functionings and capacities. And then it is not all about how senses and perception, for example, work, or how we arrive at knowledge and about moral judgments. But it's also about, for example, the question of what memories are, how representations and perceptions are mentally processed and stored, and how perceptions can be associated with memories in such a way that new representations are created. And with that, dreams also come back into the focus, for dreams provide insight into all kinds of psychological mechanisms and processes. Hence, they can be studied. The undisputed high point of the theoretical and clinical research on dreams from that time is without a doubt Sigmund Freud's voluminous study entitled Die Traumdeutung, published in the year 1900. In this study of eventually nearly 1,000 pages, Freud not only develops a very own theory of dreams and their interpretation, but to begin with, he gives also an overview of the existing theories. In it, it immediately becomes clear what the major theoretical points of contention are and were at that time. First, the question whether the dream is a continuation of the impression in a waking state, mostly the day before, or not? If it is, then dreams are a kind of processing of impressions that we had shortly before. There's also some experimental research on this, for example, on the artificial generation of dreams. Experiments were done, for example, which is very funny, by ticking the nose with a feather of somebody who was asleep. And then that person in question mentioned that he promptly found to have dreams of torture and torment. I would. But an entirely different perspective was that which stated that dreams had nothing or at all to do with impressions of the previous day, or otherwise. On the contrary, dreams seem to draw much more from memory. In dreams, memories surfaced, often also from childhood. This is, of course, the trajectory that Freud will follow. Beyond the question of the relationship between dreams and the waking state, yet what stands out above all else is the fascination with processes in dreams that are enigmatic and complex. One is fascinated by the fact that so many absurd, incoherent, exaggerated, illogical, and also immoral representations occur in dreams. In a dream, one may urinate against the wall, look back, and then find that a whole lake has formed. Or one can dream that a room is full with pigeons, with penguins. Freud will conclude from all this material that he has collected, including some of his own dreams, the dreams are wish fulfillments. We will ask Pam later how this concerns her dreams. That is, dreams show in a veiled and in an encrypted way our repressed and therefore unconscious wishes and desires stored as memories in the unconscious. Dreams are attempts to discharge psychic tension and experience pleasure, find satisfaction at repressed memories containing representations and affects. I dream, and in that dream I try to realize everything that I deny myself in daily life and to which I have no access when I am awake. Dreams are wishes and aim at satisfaction. For the latter reason, dreaming is also work or labor. He literally speaks of Traumarbeid, dream labor, performed in the dream. To dream is to work. To dream is to process or work through. In Dutch we would say doorwerken of verwerken. So dreams are not the effect of a mind calming down. To the contrary, dreams are evidence of very much and complex mental activity, of effort. Dreams are labor, just as thinking is also labor. Freud's Die Traumdeutung is a milestone in dream literature, but obviously not the last word. For as influential as it is in both scientific theorizing and in, for example, literature and art, this book is already receiving opposition in its own time, including from Carl Gustav Jung. According to Jung, dreams are primarily attempts to process impressions of the present. But in that process, Jung says, they draw on sources deeper and older than those of the individual. The dreamer draws his dream material from mythical and archaic images stored in what Jung calls the collective unconscious. What we find in dreams are often archetypical images, images that crop up again and again in each of us and that testify to some kind of a common ground. I dream, but the dream content is strictly speaking not mine. The dream expresses something that precedes and transcends us. In the dream, I connect to the experience of past generations. A very different theory. So Freud and Jung developed psychological theories of the dream and dreaming based, I haven't said that yet, but on their own clinical practices. But of course, that psychology as a science has not stood still since. Dream research has moved on from psychoanalysis through all sorts of detours and trajectories to contemporary neuroscience. And this is the place where I give the floor to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm waiting for my slides to come up. But yeah, thanks so much, Herman, for the great talk. And it's been very informative for me as well. And he has very nicely...
Yeah. Does that work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very nicely led towards my talk that is focused more on a neuroscientific perspective of dreaming. But as you will see throughout my talk, actually some of the ideas we have nowadays are not that different than the ideas they used to have about dreaming. And I think this will be a nice point where we can then also start our discussion afterwards. So, well, first, of course, as a scientist, I want to start with the definition of what are we actually talk about when we talk about dreams. And there are, of course, different definitions people use, even scientists. We can never agree on anything. But maybe the most fundamental definition of it would be to include any mental activity that occurs during sleep. So this can include, of course, this story-like dreams that we all know and probably think of, that you maybe described when you were asked to describe a dream before. But it also includes simpler things as just having a visual image, maybe even thinking about a concept or a thought. I had a dream. Or you might even just hear a song or a lyric in your head. But the key part of this definition is, of course, that it has to happen during sleep, so not during wake. So I need to briefly talk about sleep with you. Well, I mean, you all know what sleep is. You have experienced it your whole life, hopefully. And not only you, but also actually all the animals. So none know better how to sleep than our pets. But actually all animals we have researched so far seem to have a sleep-like state at least. But coming back to the humans, well, we should get around 8 hours of sleep a night. Now, most of you probably don't always do that. But in our sleep, it's not homogeneous. So the sleep doesn't stay the same throughout the whole night. We go through what we call sleep cycles. And one sleep cycle takes around 90 minutes, and we have around 4 to 5 sleep cycles a night, depending on how much sleep you get. And in each sleep cycle, we go through different stages of sleep. Well, researchers call them non-REM and REM sleep. Non-REM sleep, stage 1 and 2. Maybe you are also more familiar with the term light sleep. So if, for example, you use a sleep tracker, this is maybe what they will tell you. You got this much light sleep, so this will be equal to non-REM stage 1 and 2. Then it will also tell you probably that you didn't get enough deep sleep. That is what we would call non-REM stage 3. And then you also have REM sleep. Now, REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, is named like this because our eyes, while our lids are closed, move around quite erratically. If you want to test this, you can, for example, check your partner while they're sleeping, and you might see them do that. Yeah, so these are the sleep stages you will cycle through in the night, going back and forth between them. But now maybe your question is, well, when do we dream in this cycle? Well, so first people thought, this is Zarinsky and Kleitman, and those are the people that discovered REM sleep. Though, well, we'll get back to that, but I have wondered how we can discover something that is actually quite visually obvious. Anyway, so when they discovered REM sleep, what they thought is REM sleep means dream sleep, so that whenever you have REM, you dream. Whenever you don't have REM, you don't dream. So what they thought is that basically we dream for around 1.5 to 2 hours per night. But then studies later on, where we actually woke people up throughout the night and just asked them what was going through your mind, found that basically at any time throughout the night you can get dream reports. So maybe we're sleeping all of the time, we're dreaming all of the time we're sleeping. But it's not always that you get a lot of dream reports. So when you wake people up from REM sleep, it's around 80% of the time they will remember a dream. When you wake them up from non-REM sleep, it's around maybe 50% of the time. And then from non-REM 3, so deep sleep, it is even less than that. So potentially there is some stages where we don't dream at all. There might be some stages where we dream but tend to forget it. So we can't really say when do we dream. We just don't know for sure. But if we go by a very conservative estimate, so if you really average out how often people remember a dream, we would say, well, we have around 4.5 hours of dreams each night. So how do we study these dreams? Well, there's, of course, several methods. The easiest is a little bit what we did before, so a little questionnaire. You ask people about dreams they had, maybe the most recent ones, all the dreams they had in the lifetime. This is easy to do. We could easily do it with 200 people here, low cost, low effort. But it's not so ideal, because maybe, as you noticed before, if someone asks you about a dream you had, all of a sudden you draw a blank. You don't really remember a lot of your dreams. So if you think about the past months, and if we say we dream about 4.5 hours per night, this means you actually had 126 hours of dreams. Well, how much of these do you remember? Maybe you remember 3 dreams, and they were around, I don't know, 10 minutes long, so half an hour. So obviously, most of the dreams are forgotten. And the issue also is that the dreams you do remember are probably not representative of all the dreams you had. So it's probably a bit the weird dreams, it's the penguins, it's the flying, it's these sort of dreams that you will remember, but not a boring dream where you're just hanging out with your friends. So this is the issue. It's easy to do this questionnaire research, but it gets very biased results. So one way that is a little bit less biased is to use diaries. So you have people fill in a dream diary every morning. They wake up, they try to remember what they dreamt, write it down. You can still do this in large samples. It's a bit more effort, especially for the participants, not so much for the researchers, because every morning they have to spend some time, write down the dream. Now, this gives us a bit more dream content. So if you have someone that remembers dreams a lot, then every day you will get a dream report. And it's maybe 10 minutes of the 4.5 hours of dreaming we have. It is less biased because you get one every day. So maybe you even get some boring ones in there. But it's still not super representative, because this assumes that the dream you have towards the end of the night in REM sleep is representative of all the dreams you have throughout the night, and this, we know, is not the case. So while the diaries are better than just using questionnaires, still not a good representation of normal dreams. So what we have to do is a lot more costly and a lot more effort, is that we have people come to the lab and we measure their brain activities and we wake them up at specific times throughout the night. It is very costly for us because it means we have to stay awake. And it is, of course, not so nice for the participants who get woken up by us throughout the night, which they usually don't enjoy so much. But the good thing is that we can get a really nice sampling of dream reports throughout the night. We can even decide how often we want to do it from which sleep stage, depending on the question. Then we can look at the EEG and decide in which sleep stage they are and wake them up based on that. So it gives a much better sample. But of course, the issue still is, as you can see, it still only covers a few. Maybe if we have people that remember lots of dreams, maybe we get 1 hour of their dreams. The rest are still forgotten. So of course, what dream researchers dream about is that we could directly read dreams from brain activity, so that we don't have to wake them up and we don't have to rely on them remembering their dreams. And people have been thinking and working on this for a little while, so this came out 10 years ago. And what they did here is they had 3 participants who slept in the MRI scanner. Now, most people don't sleep very well in the MRI scanner. It's very noisy, uncomfortable, you have to lie still. But they found 3 people who could do it. And then they were mean enough that they woke them up 200 times while they were sleeping in there, and they asked about their dreams. And then what they did is they took the dream reports and basically labeled them. So, oh, this dream was about a male, there was food, and so on in there. And then they trained a model on the brain activity to predict, okay, which categories or which aspects were in the dream. And what they got out is basically this sort of decoding, so that for each category, so the red one here is that there would be a character in the dream, they got a score which indicates how likely it is. And here is one example where it worked well. Of course, that's what they took as an example. So where it predicted, oh, there's likely a character in there, and yes, there was. So they managed to get around 80% accuracy for some topics like character or location, which is not great, but also not bad. But then they also had a lot of topics where they only reached chance level, so 50%. So we're still quite far from directly decoding dreams, and that's even if we get people to sleep in the MRI scanner. So don't worry, we're not going to read out all your dreams automatically just yet. However, there's still some hope for the dream researchers that while not so many people are working on decoding dreams right now, there's a lot of people working on decoding imagined images and seen images from brain activity. So again, mainly based on people being in the fMRI scanner, very patient people who lie there for hours watching 10,000 images. And what they have done here is, yeah, they watch a lot, saw a lot of images, but then they also imagined some images. And then again, they trained it on the brain activity, tried to decode it, and also tried to reconstruct it. And this is where we are right now. So, we get some stuff right, colors, maybe composition, but at least I struggle to see an airplane in this image. So, again, we're still quite far from being able to read dreams. And this is, of course, when you train and test on the same subject, it's a lot harder if you train on one person, test on another person. So it's still quite some years in the future, but at some point, I do think we will get there when we will be able to decode dream content from brain activity, but we're not there yet. So we have to think also about other avenues, and one is lucid dreaming. So lucid dreaming means that the dreamer is aware that they are dreaming while they are dreaming. And this is actually quite cool for us, because when they are aware that they are dreaming, this means that they can communicate with us. And the way they do this is that they can use specific eye movements to tell us they are lucid. So usually it's left, right, three times. And what this recent publication has found, well, it's not only that they can talk to us, we can actually talk back to them and they can answer. So they asked them a simple math question, 8 minus 6, and they could use their eye signal to reply to us. So there's a two-way communication happening. Now, this is, of course, super cool, but it's also more a proof of concept, because actually more than half the time, they didn't reply at all. And then sometimes they also said 1 when it would have been 2. Sometimes it was kind of ambiguous what they said. So it is a super exciting new avenue, but we still need some work to really make this very reliable. But it will be super interesting, because then we can ask people while they're dreaming about their dreams, what is happening, what's going on, and so on. So now I've talked a lot about how we research dreams at the moment, or how we wish to research them in the future. Now I want to talk a little bit more about what we found out. So of course, one thing people are always interested in is, well, what do we commonly dream about? So here, this is based on data where you ask tons of people, what have you ever dreamt about? And the top 5 things are flying and falling, trying things over and over again, being chased, sexual experiences, and being at school. So this is shared dream imagery that most people have had at least once in their life. However, remember before when I said that you get biased answers? Well, this is also a little bit the case here. So things like flying, yes, you probably will have had a dream about flying, but they're actually quite rare. So less than 2% of dreams you are flying in there, but you are likely to remember them because it's cool, it's fun to fly. So in the morning you'll be excited, you'll tell someone, and then you'll remember it also later. So if we look at what do people frequently dream about, so if you use a dream diary or the last dream they remember, Then school, being chased and keep trying is still very frequent, but now what crops up is actually being late. So your dream example from before is actually quite frequent. And for some reason, also water and swimming seems to be very infrequent. If we then take only dreams that we collect in the dream lab, it gets even more boring because, yeah, as I mentioned before, people will just dream about pretty normal things, like they maybe biking somewhere, especially Dutch people bike a lot in their dreams. They will be eating something, they talk to people. The bizarreness of these dreams more often comes from that it's just a sort of weird mix and match, that maybe you're talking to a friend, but it's a friend that you haven't seen for ages, or they're somewhere that you're not used to seeing them. This is actually the more common bizarreness rather than strange flying dreams. And with more modern techniques, so we can use large language models to also process a lot of dream reports. So this is what they did in this preprint that came out last year, so not peer-reviewed yet, keep that in mind. They took 44,000 dream reports that people reported on an online platform, Reddit. And they looked at, well, how did dreams change over time, so from 2019 to 2022. And then they color-coded which topics appeared more often or less often over time. Now, as you remembered, quite some things happened in these years. So we had COVID. And during COVID, very interestingly, what changed is that we dreamt less about outdoor locations, and we dreamt less about movements, actions, interactions, and so on. Just about as we had all the lockdowns, as we were all inside. So our dreams can reflect our day-to-day reality a lot. Also, very interestingly, they saw this increase in violence and death in dreams just around the time the Ukraine war started. So our dreams change over time and they respond to real-world events. Dreams don't only change over time, they also change across the lifespan. So as I said, being chased is quite common in dreams, but the older you get, the less of these dreams you have. Interestingly, school and teachers, that is also common. Yes, you have the most of them while you're a teenager and in school all the time. But very interestingly, you have them again as the older you become, the more you actually dream about this again. So there's this interesting patterns across life. So now the big question, why do we dream? And the disappointing answer, we don't know. We just don't know. I mean, we have a lot of hypotheses. We have some data, but we don't have a lot of good data. And well, there are two issues. One is it's a very difficult question to answer, because so if we say dream is consciousness during sleep, well, we also have consciousness during wake. Who here can tell me why we're conscious during wake? Probably no one, right? So it's a little bit the same issue. We don't really know for sure. We don't understand consciousness that well, and it's very hard to actually answer this. And it's also hard to experimentally research because we can't switch it on and off at will. So we can't do an experiment where we just say, okay, these people will dream, this will not dream, and these will not dream, and then we see what's the difference. But I'll still take you through some hypotheses that we had of why we dream and some of the data supporting it. So, of course, some people think it's just a random byproduct, no meaning, no function. But then there's also some functions that have been suggested, such as memory consolidation, simulating future situations, and emotional processing. So the first neurobiological theory of dreaming is that there's basically no function or meaning to dreams, that it's just a random byproduct. And what they thought in the activation synthesis model of dreaming is that basically when we're asleep, signals are generated in the brainstem and they activate regions in the cortex. And the cortex then tries to make meaning of this signal, but there's actually no meaning to it. Now, while there are these activations that spread throughout, I think most researchers have moved away from that this is completely random. And that doesn't mean that there is a functional relevance to it, but at least that it gives us some insight. And one of the things that I think most people agree upon maybe that dreams are related to our recent waking life. So I'm sure you had the experience. You have an exam, and then it's very likely that you will dream about this exam later on. So we have found that more than half of our dreams reflect aspects of recent waking life experience, but very few are episodic. So you will dream about the exam, but maybe your teacher is someone you knew from your childhood, or all of a sudden the exam was not, I don't know, on chemistry, but on something weird like dreaming. So you mix and match your experiences that you had. You don't replay an exact memory. And based on this knowledge, that we dream a lot about recent experience and knowledge from the sleep field, that memories are reactivated during sleep and they're consolidated during sleep. Of course, researchers have begun to wonder, well, does dream content reflect this memory consolidation during sleep? And well, 16 research groups have wondered this, I guess, to be quite precise. So they have all conducted studies, and in these studies, the way we study this is that we give people a task to learn before they go to sleep. Then they sleep, and we collect their dream reports, and then we test them on this memory task. And we look at, okay, are the ones that dream about it better than the ones that do not dream about the task? And generally, yes, this is true for different types of learning, such as declarative learning, so learning facts, procedural learning, so learning skills like playing the piano, and spatial learning. This all seems to be true. But very interestingly, this mainly seems to be true for non-REM dreams. So as you remember, the early night dreams, and not these late night dreams that are very vivid. But overall, yes, it seems to be that dreams to some aspect, some way relate to memory consolidation. But a bit of caution is needed. For one, all these results are based on very small sample sizes, 20, 25 participants, which is not great, but usually all people manage to do in the sleep lab. And the other thing is, of course, just because we see this correlation, well, you've heard it before, correlation does not mean causation, so doesn't mean that dreams are what causes the better memory. They might just reflect processes that go on anyway, and don't actually interact with these processes in a meaningful way. But still, overall, at least, dreams reflect this memory consolidation that is going on. Now, when I mentioned the exam part before, well, what you maybe thought about is, it's not only that we dream about what has happened before, we also dream about upcoming things, right? So if you have an upcoming exam, so you probably will dream about it the nights before. And this was also nicely shown in a study by Arne and colleagues, where they looked at students that had a medical exam, and actually the amount of dreams they had about the exam beforehand predicted if they passed it. So it seems to be beneficial if we dream about future events. And this is actually even true if the dreams are negative, so they failed the exam in the dream, they were late, still help them pass. So maybe, Pam, your negative dreams about tonight predicts that we'll have a successful event. And this is kind of the core of the idea that dreams are a simulation of the future. And this was mainly put forward by Radboud. And what he said is that dreams have actually an evolutionary adaptation, because in dreams we can simulate future events, and that can help us actually survive. Because one of the things we simulate are threatening events. So especially our ancestors who had to run away from some predators, if they could practice this in their dreams, they would actually get better and more successful and would survive longer. Nowadays, not so much an issue being hunted by crocodiles, but there's other things that can be scary, social situations, things like what I'm doing today presenting. This is quite scary, so maybe good if you practice in your dreams. Now, this is a very nice theory. The problem is, again, it's quite hard to actually research because, well, we can't really influence evolution. We can't make some people survive and others not, and then see, well, who dreamt more, and so on. So it's a bit hard to really get good research data on it. So now I want to talk about the last part, and that is dreaming and emotion. Now, I'm sure you've all experienced this, that a good night's sleep usually helps us resolve our emotion, that we feel better, more positive after we get some good sleep. And so for a long time, scientists have also noticed that, well, sleep helps us reduce the emotional tones of our memory. So if we have an emotional memory, we have both the memory itself, but also our emotional response to it. So we get nervous when we think about it. And while this nervousness is maybe good as you experience it, you don't want to think back 1 year ago and still be super nervous about something that happened there. So what you want to do is strip this affective tone from the memory. And in the sleep to remember, sleep to forget theory, what is posited is that this happens during sleep and maybe dreaming over the night, so that in the end you still have the memory, because the emotion told you the memory is super relevant, keep that, but you get rid of basically your affective response to it. There's more data on this about sleep in general, not so much about if dreaming helps with this, but there's one kind of interesting early study that looked at people that just go through divorce. And they looked at if the people dreamt about their partner while they had the divorce, and then they followed them up a year later to see, well, how are the people doing? And what they found is that the people that dreamt about their partner a lot during the divorce actually adapted better after 1 year than the ones that did not. So maybe there is something to this working through emotions in your dream. So now I talked about 3 theories, memory, simulation, emotion. And while they kind of sprung up as different theories, actually what we're getting around to more and more is that they are all linked. Because what is the purpose of having a memory? Well, the purpose of having the memory is that we don't have to start on 0 every new day. It is to prepare us for the future. And one way we can do that is that we simulate a likely future so that we are better equipped to actually deal with it. And of course, emotion is what tells us what will be relevant from the past for the future. So it all goes together. And so what we think is going on in our brain at night is basically that we consolidate the past, that we then simulate the future, and that emotion tells us what is important here in the long term. And dreaming either reflects these processes or actively helps us do this during the night. Yeah, thank you. That is it from my side. Thanks for your attention. And one quick note from my side, if you think this is interesting and want to support our research, we do need more participants for the study, so let us know.
Well, I'm not exactly sure whether you've sold them on the idea of doing this. But maybe some people will be eager after hearing you speak. So thank you both. I have a lot of questions, but maybe before we dive into the content of it more, I was quite fascinated to hear you speak about the way that our current experiences influence the way we dream. Because I was thinking, you study dreams during the night and you wake people up from their dreams, so they see you around them all the time. Does that mess with what they dream about at all?
Yeah, it does. So it's definitely not a rare occurrence for me that people dream about me in their dreams. It's awkward at first, but you kind of get over it. You get over yourself. So yes, it does mess with them, but actually for us, it's not a huge problem because this is actually exactly what we're interested in. So this incorporation of memories into dreams. And it's not, of course, not just the person, but also the whole setting. So it's very common that people in the sleep lab dream about the sleep lab. They dream about being woken up. They dream about the whole setting. But this actually all goes to provide more support for this hypothesis that dreaming is important for memory consolidation. So we're not unhappy about it. Let's put it that way.
And I mean, I guess you get used to anything.
You get used to anything, yeah. I mean, actually, if I can mention this, my partner over there, he had to come to the lab one time because I had to take over a shift of someone that was sick, and it was our last night together. And he was like, "Isn't this weird for you?" Like sitting there watching people sleep and dream. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's weird on paper, but if you do it 80 times, then it becomes normal.
It becomes second nature.
Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I I feel like there is a big chasm between where you left us in at the end of your story, Herman, with Freudian interpretation of dreams and the meaning of dreams, and then the way that we research dreams now. I'm saying we, like I do anything, but neuroscientists like Sarah. And how do you, like, does that feature in your research into psychoanalysis at all? Like the way that we view dreams now, as we have brain scans and all that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, but I see more connections maybe than there might be appearing at first sight, because in your last picture you mentioned memory, simulation, emotion. But these are exactly also the components with which Freud works, and not only Freud but also his contemporaries. They are interested in dreams as displaying or somehow involving memories, which is not self-evident to think. Because you could also say it is just a way of processing experiences from the day before, but this idea that it connects to memories of the past, you mentioned this, the emotional aspect, so the affective load, Freud would say, of a dream content. And then, of course, well, that's the intriguing question. I would say the relation between the function of a dream and the meaning of a dream, which is two different things. Freud, of course, was more interested in the meaning of dreams, because they were supposed to say something about the current state and the past experiences of a person, so something about the character of a person or the kind of problems a person was suffering. And that's something else than the research on, let's say, the mental functioning. But I see a lot of elements that are quite connected.
Exactly. I think when I heard your talk, I basically felt like, well, maybe we've just come full circle, because it seems like all the points I mentioned, people have already thought about. Now, of course, for example, the simulations versus telling the future is not exactly the same thing, but it still sort of has the same component in there. Same with memory, same with emotions. So, yeah, somehow we've circled back around and just came to what people have thought all along. But now we have a little bit more data to prove it, and maybe, a little bit less about the meaning, but really more function. So, of course, all the things I talked about doesn't require that the person interprets their own dream or that the person sits down and thinks about their dream. All these things happen anyway. You don't actually need to recall your dreams for that. You don't need to work on the dreams for that.
So through a neuroscientific lens, would it even make sense to ask, for example, a question about a certain element in a dream? What does this stand for, or what does it mean? How can we interpret this? Would that even make sense, that question?
I think not in a, for example, definitely not in a Jungian way where you say like the witch means this or this means this. I don't think we have found any scientific evidence for that. So the only way certain elements would be interpreted is, for example, if you see, like what we do, for example, with the memory task, where we present them certain pictures, and then we look for these pictures in their dreams, but it's not the picture itself that we're interested in, just because they learned that picture. So it's, not sort of these archetypes, but relating to specific experiences, basically.
And you showed us, was it the dream decoder? That's not what it's called, but the machine, the little machine that decodes the dreams, presumably in the future.
Yes.
How far away are we of that, do you think?
I think it's very hard to predict. It's still quite far away, as said. And again, there is a big difference between theoretically being able to do it on someone that sleeps in a scanner and that you've trained on thousands of hours of data versus applying it to the public. So applying it to the public, I think we're still very, very far away from. The other ways, it is hard to predict, because every now and then we make these big jumps of where all of a sudden things become possible, as we've seen with ChatGPT and these sort of models, where all of a sudden we can create art and things like that probably most people wouldn't have predicted that this jump came. So I don't want to put like a timeline on it, but yeah, I think that we can read the audience's dreams, for example, is still very far away. That we can decode some stuff in the lab, that is
we
sort of already sort of do that to some degree.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, a dream is, of course, also not one single image. You also have to keep that in mind. It might be easy to decode one image, but a dream is a whole scene. There's a lot of elements. And just because you can say there was a house there, you can't say that it was this specific house from their childhood or something like that. So there's lots of layers.
And Herman, you mentioned the story of Joseph and him having these predictive dreams or these prophetic dreams. So why would you think that there are so many accounts throughout history where somebody dreamt something that came true afterwards? Like, why is that so common?
I don't know if it's so common. It happens.
Probably confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias?
If that when it then turns out to be true, then people remember it because it turned out to be true, but there's probably a lot of dreams.
Oh,
but
right.
Of course, it also makes sense if you think of what Sarah told about a kind of anticipating of what is going to happen. Because, I mean, even the dreams of Joseph are not that spectacular in that sense. I mean, a pharaoh dreaming about the years to come. He's the pharaoh of a kingdom. He is supposed to think about the future. That is what we expect from our politicians.
He needs to worry about
that they do.
that sort of thing, yeah.
That he should be worried about that. And so it's not strange that he thinks about, well, this is going all right now, and because we have a lot of harvest, etc., etc. But there could be other times. I mean, this is also a kind of an anticipatory dream. It's not predicting, you could say. You could also say from your perspective, it is anticipating what is coming. So,
and then sometimes it lines up with actually what comes, and sometimes it probably doesn't line up, right? But that's not the ones that was written about.
For tonight, I hope it doesn't, because that would be very bad news for everyone in this room. But, and Herman, you mentioned at some point, I believe I heard you say that Freud was a neuroscientist himself as well.
Yeah, he comes from neuroscience or from
neurology.
Yes.
Neurology.
Yeah.
What would that look like in the time before brain scans?
That's a good question. It would be very speculative to a large extent, and to a large extent based on anatomical research. So what they would do, and what Freud also did when he was a medical student, is slice up brain and spine. That's the research that they did, and through anatomical...
on cadavers, hopefully.
I hope so too, yes. Don't worry for those who now are going to be in Sarah's experiment.
No slicing.
But this is where they started. It just started from anatomical research, and just, you know, that's the fundamental idea of scanning a brain. How do you scan? You slice it in pieces. And then you start to seek out, and then of course you can have microscopes and you can look into cells and nerve systems, etc. So there is of course a proto neuroscience in a certain sense.
Yeah. So how did he reconcile that very hands-on slicing up brains activity with these way more psychological interpretations of dreams, and dreams as messages from our deepest subconscious self?
Well, that's a long story, but to keep it very short, what Freud is confronted with, and with not only he, but several neurologists in his time, is that there are certain clinical phenomena that cannot easily be displayed with a call upon an anatomical defect or an organic lesion or something like nervous generation, etc. So there is an urge there to look for purely psychological theory. That does not contradict, of course, the neurological findings. This is always something that Freud is very careful about. But something that helps to explain those cases that you cannot explain through the normal, established anatomical and neurological research, which makes sense, of course. Then you need a psychological theory. The psychological theory will be the psychoanalytic theory that Freud develops, that maybe some of the psychological problems that we have and that we also dream about have something to do with traumatic experiences in the past.
But then dreams were supposed to be wish fulfillment also.
Yes, because these experiences in the past are, let's say, ambiguous in the sense that they were highly unpleasurable, and at the same time there was maybe some kind of a pleasure involved. And so the wish fulfillment has to do with that, with the part of experience, the experiences and the affective load of the experience that is repressed and nevertheless surfaces in the form of a wish that needs satisfaction, that aims at satisfaction. It's very, let's say, you could also formulate it in a different way, because Freud never really leaves the neurology of his time. For him, satisfaction and pleasure is nothing but the discharge of energy and tension. So it's only draining off. Yeah? And this is something that also was mentioned by you in your talk, that maybe dreaming is just processing and draining off emotion, for example. And Freud comes very close to that idea, that dreams, wish fulfillment is nothing but discharge of tension. So getting rid of tension, getting rid of affects, emotions, if you would like.
Then I guess I have well, two questions for you about the way that we experience dreams. So first of all, dreams tend to be very illogical. They tend to be very strange if you look back on them when you're awake. Like, is there a neurological explanation for that? Why aren't they logically structured?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of aspects to this, partially this is because of the how or which parts of our brain are active. So there's while we sleep, and depending on the sleep stage, this also differs. But especially more frontal areas tend to be less active than during wake. So what maybe during wake you would realize in that moment, hey, this doesn't make sense, you don't tend to realize in the dream. So you only tend to realize it after waking up that didn't make a lot of sense, that goes together. So this is one idea we have there. But there's also probably a lot of reasons, as in that in the dreams we have this quick temporal switches, so that sort of time and places are not as linear and constant, moving in one direction as they do during wake. And we don't question this while we dream.
Why don't we? Why do dreams feel so real while you're in them?
Because basically, so yeah, one aspect is that our basically checking of does this make sense doesn't work as well while we sleep, but also because our brains are really good at making up this simulation. So we also see this during wake. So we get very similar brain activity if you see something versus if you imagine something.
So daydreaming, sort of.
So daydreaming also, exactly. So for our brain, there are some differences between actually perceiving and imagining, but the differences aren't that huge. So this also applies to sleep. So the differences between dreaming something versus actually experiencing it isn't that big. And then if some parts of your brain aren't as active and don't check, then it actually feels pretty real to you. Yeah.
So I can imagine that. For example, so how does a dream become a nightmare then? Because if you're trying to simulate dreams, then why does our brain add that layer of emotion that makes it very unpleasurable to experience? Why does that happen? Like, is that necessary?
Yeah, so again, hard to answer. For one thing, it also depends on what you define as nightmares. So there's one definition where a nightmare is only a nightmare if it's so bad that you wake up from it. But other things are called bad dreams. And there definitely seems to be sort of a gradient of when is it functional, so when does it actually help you, versus when it becomes dysfunctional. So I'm sure everyone has heard about these repetitive nightmares we get in PTSD, where you dream about the traumatic situation over and over again, and this is definitely not functional anymore. So something is going really wrong there. What we think that potentially happens there is that actually your brain is trying to do this emotional processing, but it's not managing to do that. So it keeps doing it every night, but it just cannot manage to strip the emotion from it. And why it doesn't manage, we don't know for sure yet, but it might have something to do about your body being sort of in this hyper-aroused state even during sleep, so constantly. So this dissociation basically of your bodily response with the memory that should happen because normally during sleep our muscles are relaxed, we don't get this sort of bodily response. So typically that could be a way I said, we don't know for sure, but that's a hypothesis on how we disentangle this. And that maybe, for example, in PTSD, this doesn't work because we have this hyper arousal during sleep and wake going on. But then, of course, the nightmares, or maybe, let's say, more bad dreams, can be functional if we think about this in this simulation, especially the threatening situation simulation. So basically this negative aspect might be that we are actually just preparing ourselves, that if we come upon negative situations in the day, that we are most prepared to react to them. So this is where this negative emotion will come up.
Comes in.
And also one has to say that actually most dreams are rated neutral or positive. So while there's...
Really? Maybe the nightmares are just more memorable.
Exactly, I think here the bias comes in again. But if you have people do a dream diary, and also in the awakenings in the lab, nearly all of the dreams are rated neutral, but then we have more positive ones than negative ones.
This is absolutely fascinating because...
Oh.
No, because and now I have to speak as a Freudian. Freud also talks about the dreams of shell shock patients, so what we would nowadays call PTSD patients. After the First World War, there were a lot of these patients. And he also focuses on this idea that these patients repeatedly repeat the same highly disturbing scenes. They're being in the trenches, etc., shelled and bombed, and etc. And then he says that what these dreams actually try to do but fail is to develop anxiety, because he says what in these dreams reappears is fright, and fright has no object. It is being surprised by something that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
But anxiety would be the expectance of a danger. And so he says it helps us to prepare anxiety, and anxiety would be a first kind of protective shield against fright, because it helps us to, let's say, in a first organization, kind of distance ourselves from the actual danger. I know what I'm afraid of, which is actually also, in a sense, true of nightmares. That they can be called fright dreams, but you could also say in the nightmare, the nightmare is an anxiety dream because somehow you see the danger approaching and then you wake up. It's not completely unexpected, or maybe it's an issue of fright and anxiety. But there also the idea is exactly the same that you are saying, is that the repetition of the trauma is an attempt to organize psychic life again. That's basically the idea. It's the same. It's the same theory, basically.
How did he link that to wish fulfillment, though? So how can we see the wish fulfillment?
How
Only anxiety dreams would be wish fulfillments. Fright dreams would not. Fright dreams is there's no wish fulfillment in
so this goes against his theory of all dreams.
They are, as it were, they come before the nightmare. The nightmare would already be a step forward to organized psychic life, because I'm in a nightmare. I can be aware of what exactly the danger is that I'm confronted with.
I'm going to go to the audience in a bit, but I think I have to ask one more question that has been on my mind for quite a while when I was listening to you both. Is just suppose that at some point we do arrive at a complete account, like a neurological answer to the dream question. Like we know exactly why we dream, we know how it works. Do you think that would kill the magic a little bit? Like, would we still ascribe the meaning that we do to dreams, or is that role just done then? Have we solved it?
I mean, I guess it depends, because even now I think people might see more magic in dreams than maybe neuroscientists would see. I mean, I'm obviously fascinated by dreams, like that's why I come here, I talk about this, I spent my life collecting this data. Waking people up. So obviously I'm fascinated by this, but at the same time I don't see anything magical in dreams, as in that they have a meaning beyond what's going on in our brain. So maybe this magic can be gone, but the fascination can still remain.
You have the last word?
I'm going to give a Kantian answer. As long as I have mental activity, I know that I'm not dead.
I mean,
which is quite comforting.
that is a comforting note to go to the audience with.
So thanks, guys, for all your dreams. Just to sort of placate you a bit, I didn't see any names, so I can't sort of pinpoint all the weird dreams about, I don't know, sort of cannibalistic chessboards and all the deaths of mothers and brothers and sisters. I mean, you spared us the Oedipus complex, but I think Freud would have a field day in this room. Right. So I do this sort of live writing more often. This is the first time I do this in English, but I'm just going to give this a go. I had a date with someone whose Tinder profile listed dreams as her main skill. Still expected her to be a hippie, not a hipster, so I asked her and she said she'd learn not to read between the lines, but to look between them. Take that waiter, for instance. May seem like open book, but look closer at his coffee-stained fingers and you'll see that last night he lost his pet llama, or maybe 3, in a Swedish shopping mall. Can't focus at all today, so he spilled that wonderful cappuccino on that tired bus driver, and she shifted her shift from Rotterdam to Utrecht this morning because her REM sleep damned her to getting lost in IKEA. Well, instead, she'd rather boss around and beat Billie Eilish while playing Yahtzee. So I turned to me, listed my own dreams, how I flew away and stayed there for a whole day until I got chased away by paper birds and planes in zero gravity. How I also played Yahtzee with Billy, but unfortunately I lost. Until I looked down to see pirates plundering my dorm room, a wolf eating my mother, and on the other side a cheating girlfriend, Timothy Chalamet, flying away on a broom, a Radboud professor becoming prime minister, and honestly other stuff way too sinister for a first date. She said she'd heard that before. Knew from that wolf dream I was a her before, a sheep said dreams are a sight into soul, into sleep, and never insignificant. Can never be ignored because it's diagnosis. It's a sort of seismological focus shaking, it's future focus, it's science, not hocus pocus. It shows some growth, so own this, like prophecy for your own reality. I now know you'll defend me against piracy. Work through your own emotions thoroughly and train your brain to gain better responses. For when our father of philosophy, Herman, fulfills his fantasy as prime minister, will administer us to read dreams again, to weather torture by feather and get together to process the time we said God bless when someone's dream Sona killed their mother. But beyond that, she said it's a test for second dates. Because all these biblical ancient accounts that stayed anticipation, its relation to our present situation, so I asked her, still shaking, if I passed. She said it'd be my wish. Beyond atomic bombs, dead moms, friends baked into bread, stars as eyes that look ahead against giant red chessboards, she said it'd be my wish, but no go. I like Yahtzee, but I won't date someone who lost against Billie Eilish. Thanks so much.